Hi, my name is Jason. I'm today with Patrick and Carl. We are pre-modern player based in Montreal and Ottawa, and we wanted to present some of the deck that got into the top four in the last Boreal Premodern that happened 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago. So I wanted first to introduce you to, you probably heard about him if you're delve a little into pre-modern. It's Patrick Burt. Patrick Burt, how are you?
Sure, I'm doing very well. Glad to be here.
Glad to be here. Patrick is from Ottawa, was the tournament organizer. And we also have from Montreal, Carl Rivet-Arnois. Hi, Carl.
Hello, hello.
Yes, hi. The reason why I invited you is because you're both really deep into pre-modern. You play more than I do. And I wanted to do some chat about why will people play the pre-modern format. So first, Patrick, what is pre-modern?
Sure. So Premodern is a kind of custom format that's managed by not Wizards of the Coast. So it features sets from 1995 to 2003, specifically kind of fourth edition all the way to
Scorch.
Scourge, and doesn't include any kind of non-standard legal sets. So think like starter and stuff like that. And really, it tries to set itself apart from Legacy. It tries to set itself apart from Old School. So it does have a few kind of cards that you don't really see banned in other formats that do happen to be legal in this format and do have their own home in this format. It's been around for quite a few years. I think a lot of people, their biggest criticism is that it's a closed format, so the meta is going to get stale. And I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But I think by virtue of playing the format now for probably about 6 years, around there, I've seen the format shift. I've seen new decks come and go. I've seen innovations, and it's been really a refreshing format to play despite the kind of closed nature of it.
Do you want to add something, Carla?
It's a pretty good explanation.
Yeah, we're good with that.
Yeah.
So Premodern is mainly, I think, played over Magic Online and over webcam. If you look at the Premodern webcam community on Facebook. But what I like is like since the end of the pandemic, we're starting to see a couple of tournaments being organized into store and bar. There's a scene in Montreal, in Ottawa, also in Quebec. I heard about some store far away Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean that is doing a tournament each month. So I really want to get like people into that format. Patrick, you organized your first pre-modern tournament on February 22nd. We were 18 player, if I remember. Huh?
Yeah, it was 18 players. It wasn't the first one that we run out of Montreal, or sorry, run out of Ottawa, because we did have pre-modern as kind of an addendum or an annex
Oh
to a
yeah,
old
that's
school
right. That's
tournament
true.
that
Yeah.
we ran. I think it was 3 years ago, where I
Yeah.
tried to do a old school 5 rounds of old school and then 4 rounds of pre-modern. But turns out like 9 rounds of Magic is too much for a lot of people. So I kind of shelved the pre-modern idea and kind of separated out the tournaments and ran them separately. And like you said, this year is the first time that I ran it as a standalone out here in Ottawa.
So what I wanted to present was if you go on the description of the video, you will see a link to a tournament report wrote by Patrick, where you have all the deck lists of the 18 player. But for this video, I only wanted to talk about uh, the the top four of that tournament. I wanted first to talk about the winning deck, which is I think one of the one of consider it one of the top deck in the pre-modern format. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's the usually when we think about the Magic from the end of the 90s, beginning of the 2000, we think about the Elf deck with Gaze Cradle, Survival of the Fittest, and Priest of Titania. Basically, you ramp all your 1 mana, 2 mana Elf to ramp a lot of mana, and then you goes off with either Deranged Hermit or Hunting Pack. Do you have anything to add about this was Arlen King, I believe his name on Magic Online, right?
Yeah, that's right. So what's interesting about the Elves deck is if you're a Legacy player, it's very similar to how you play in Legacy. Wirewood Symbiote, Query, and Ranger being very core cards. Similarly in Pre-Modern, that as it is to Legacy. What I find interesting about the Elves deck is that in the time that I've played, I've seen it change over time. So in the early days, there was actually no splash for red, and it wasn't uncommon to kill someone with biorhythm. Biorhythm, if you're not aware, it's each person's life total becomes equal to the number of creatures they had.
Yeah.
And that used to be your kill con. You just have a pile of dudes, your opponent would have one or two, then you'd swing in for the kill. And then in the years that followed, you kind of saw red getting added specifically for anger, specifically for squee, to kind of get that value from survival of the fittest. And actually, what you're seeing today, the hunting pack edition, is actually a new, relatively newish edition,
It's a storm
specifically
deck.
by Ireland King, if I remember correctly, also known as Pat McElligott in the community here. And that's something that just gives you a little bit more versatility in elves, and being able to kind of quote unquote go off at instant speed if you need to, or throw in a 4/4 if you need to. And anyways, I thought it's been a really innovative addition to the deck, and it really kind of shows its versatility. Carl, I know you've been in the community for longer than I have. I was wondering if you saw anything more in terms of the elves evolution.
Yeah, you were talking about the early days of elves, but they haven't been playing survival for a long time, which was puzzling. So survival is like not a recent addition, but beginning of format, it was like a couple of years without the survivals. In that deck, and then like he was playing Tango Wire. Some lists I think still do play
Yes,
Tango Wire.
we still see with
Um,
Tingle Wire
yeah,
in Ottawa.
yeah.
But
But I don't
that's
know why it took so long before people added the survival in that deck.
this is interesting because like we think about Premodern as a closed format since there's no new card that are added, but the meta change. I mean, there's so many different version of Elf. Do you think there's one that is definitely the best one, or there's still debate around it?
It's a very complex deck to play, so if you're not a pilot, it's a bit hard to have a recommendation, I would say. I have never played the deck personally, but this version felt good when I was facing it. It has all of the tools that you would expect, right? So like the anger, survival. The Kamal was one of the cards I was like hesitating, but like every single elf player that I talked to preached it. So yeah,
Yeah, and I think this is one of the decks that it suffers from its high price point.
yeah,
There are decks you can get into pre-modern, that are $50 to $300, and it's not just burn, burn, and burn. Like there are definitely a good
Yeah.
wide range of decks you can play
Yes.
if you wanted to be on a budget. This is not one of them. Between survivals and Gaia's Cradles, even if you're getting the gold borders, they do set you back quite a bit, and I think that does change a little bit how much it gets played, especially when you're looking at webcam tournaments. And a lot of the tournaments that are run for pre-modern are not necessarily proxy friendly. Always, it's always up to the organizer. But the big ones that we see happening are not.
Hmm.
In Ottawa, we do things a little bit differently, but we're not representative of the entire kind of pre-modern format.
Are these real gas cradle? I see that they are a white border.
Yeah, Patrick whiteboarded the World Championship deck, Guy's Cradles.
Oh, so those are gold border, and
Those are gold borders that are white bordered. Yeah.
yeah, he changed it.
nice.
That's look cool. Yeah, it's really
Yeah. So
interesting.
there is a pattern of pre-modern organizers allowing gold bordered cards. And
Hmm.
that does kind of alleviate a bit of the financial kind of impact of some of the cards, especially some bigger staples like City of Traders, Ancient Tomb, Survival, and Guy's Cradle, which you're seeing here.
Hmm.
And I think the survivals are also white border gold ones,
Yes, they
but
were.
I could be corrected there. Maybe
So,
he's hiding the little golden signature there that really
what do you
gives it
think is
away.
the weakness of a health deck?
Oh, there
I
is a
thought,
point where some people will main deck pyroclasms.
yeah.
That has happened. Apart from that, I'm kind of like Carl. I'm not a huge Elves player.
Uh-huh.
Love watching it, kind of go off and do its thing. But I do make sure that if I'm playing a pre-modern deck that it can deal with decks that go wide, because this is not the only deck where there are a lot of little creatures filling up the board.
Yeah, this is a bit similar to Parfait in the sense that the price point keeps people out of it, right? So right before the ban, there was kind of like a not a consensus, but people were discussing how Parfait was the best deck. But in terms of play rate, it was pretty low
Mhm.
given the Mox Diamonds. So this is a bit similar, right? So this is probably one of the best deck, but it's not played that much.
Speaking of a complicated deck to play, I want to talk about your deck, Carl. The deck that you have fun, but nobody else have. But me personally, I really like it. That's a deck I really like to see. It's kind of like a side quest of playing that deck since you need to find your island. It's the Stasis, huh? For those who doesn't know Stasis, it's an enchantment that costs two, huh? Two Stasis is two. Two
Two, yeah.
mana? Two mana. You don't have no player has an untapped step, and you need to pay one blue at your upkeep. So the whole deck is built around that card. Um, uh, Carl, I know you have played that deck for a long time. It's your top deck for tournament. It's considered I think one of the rising deck in the pre-modern environment. I saw that at the Lobster Con back in September there were a lot of Stasis deck. Well, do you have anything to add about that?
I mean, I could talk about this deck for
Go on, go
hours, I would
on.
say, but
Take five
um,
minutes.
what I like about this, I mean, this deck feels very strong. Even if you take a look at like the data, for example, from Duress Crew, they have a website where you can see the matchup win rate. Like it has some poor matchup that I personally feel are not that bad. Just because this deck kind of capitalizes a lot on mistakes. It's like you need to be prepared and have some reps versus that deck to know how to play against it. It plays a very weird type magic. So in tournaments, you'll catch bad matchups. You will win bad matchups just from like the lack of experience of your opponent. So um, yeah, so you have like a slight edge on capitalizing on mistake, I would say. I think this has like a great slime matchup. I know this is like not a position that's echoed by everyone in the community, but like my win rate versus slide is extremely high. This
You mean the burn
this
deck?
tournament, huh?
You mean the burn deck against the
Yeah,
burn?
yeah, the burn deck, yeah. So this tournament, I tried the propaganda, which is like the latest like cool kid thing in the Stasis player are trying. I didn't like it that much. It's a bit clunky. It's a bit expensive. Um, it removes from like having more redundancy, like playing boomerang, playing like more like the full four vice, more counterspell, etc. So I might cut it. I'm not confident. I'll keep like the three propaganda.
Hmm.
But yeah, we just talked about Elf. Elf is like probably the worst matchup. Um, People haven't solved it. Like even with four Curse Totem, it's still somewhat unwinnable. Like the next thing I want to try is Hibernation. I never tried it before. I think it could be better, maybe in some cases in Curse Totem, as silly as it sounds. Um, but yeah, I just think it's a great deck. It feels really really strong when you play it. And it's not that complex, to be honest. You need to. I know people are saying that it's a complex deck to play, but you just need to understand like what's relevant is different for this deck than every single other Magic deck. So as soon as you understand what's relevant and what's not, I think it's not a simple deck, but it's a much less complex deck than people are making it sound.
You don't counter spell back because I see you have a lot of counter spell, but you don't counter spell the first thing the other play. You really need to wait for the one that are really worth it.
Again, it depends. I would say depends on the
Yeah.
matchup. Like, yeah,
Let's say against a burn deck.
um, against a burn deck, there's not a lot that is worth countering early game against a burn deck. I would say. So the days and are mostly there to keep like against Burn. What I've been doing is I've enjoyed playing the four Vice to put them under a clock, and jamming a stasis as fast as possible. So getting to an early stasis. The Burn deck is very mana hungry. If you jam a stasis early, they're gonna lose. And if you don't give them infinite time, which is why I like playing the four Vice. And then both side you have to watch out for the Red Blast, the Power Blast, and I'm bringing like 4 Chills and 3 Blasts, which is maybe a bit overkill. But yeah,
cool.
It's more of a concession to Goblin, which is a harder matchup I find than Sly. I think Sly is not that bad, but Goblin is a bit more tricky. Yeah.
What do you think, Patrick, about Stasis?
It's definitely not a deck that I like to play against, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people share that opinion.
Yeah.
But what I find fascinating about it is, it's not an expensive deck to buy.
Nope.
And a lot of cards.
It's a cheap control deck.
Yeah, and you're seeing cards that you wouldn't normally play in another format, like Gush. Their Stasis exists in a lot of formats, but doesn't see play in a lot of formats. So I do find the ability to now play a deck that kind of is nostalgic. Stasis has been around for a long time, and be able to succeed with it, I think is really fulfilling.
Yeah, I think it's really fun to play.
To play
it is really fun. There's me. I only played it in some casual. I really like all the decision you have to make and to make sure that I really like when I say like a kind of like it feel like a side quest. To know that you really need to have your blue mana ready on the next turn. This is why you play like Impulse and those kind of thing. You really need to put. You kind of prepare your next turn farther into the future. I really like doing that. I don't know what I mean, Carl, but this is how I feel about that deck. It's really like. You know when to play your stasis to lock everything, and like you're really sure that for the next couple of turns you'll be good.
Yeah.
It's a planning deck. I really like this.
Yeah, one of another tricky matchup for this is I would say Terrageddon, especially if they're playing Mending Mages. It's a bit tricky.
If they name Stasis, you won't be able to cast it.
Yeah, normally I've seen them name Chain of Vapor first and then Stasis. But yeah, like in either case, it's pretty hard. Like they also have a great clock, and if they know how to play the matchup, they send back their Port and Wastelands in their hand. And the play pattern of Stasis is oftentimes you have only one island up, and you're paying for Stasis, playing another island, and you only have one island up, so you can get caught by like a Port that you don't know about. And if you're trying to do that play pattern where you only are paying with a Forsaken City and everything else is tapped, you get cut by a Wasteland. So they give you like a lot of pressure plus really, really irrelevant interaction on what you're trying to do. So I think that's also a very hard matchup.
Speaking of getting caught by a Wasteland, does that bring us to our third deck there, Jason?
Which one do you want to go? Do we want to go on your, or do we talk about the Enchantress first?
Yeah, let's go to mine.
Okay, let's go. So here it is.
I've been playing. So getting into Oath was one of the things that I just see in the format. Never playing Oath, I thought to myself, "Oh my god, I need to play this card." It's banned in Legacy. It's played in Vintage, but it was something I really want to do. And I actually played a lot of games versus Carl. I played games against Jason as I was kind of building this Oath deck.
Yeah.
God, 7 years ago. So I've been playing a lot of different variants. This deck that you're seeing here, you won't see it on TC Decks, TC Decks being a very famous place where people post pre-modern decks. You're not going to see this deck there apart from mine because I brewed this up.
Yeah.
Is it close to decks that exist already? Absolutely. So
just for audience, sorry, Patrick. I just like when you say you tried multiple variation of this, I still remember you even had Urzatron Oath deck.
Yeah,
that's been wild.
Like it's really cool.
A long time.
If you dig deeper in my YouTube channel, you'll find it. Continue.
Yeah,
But
and
yeah, when you were saying that this build is atypical, like I can echo that because you even caught me off guard on the during the tournament. Like just from the, I was like trying to read the deck. I was like, okay, this is like green white oat, which is like usually the like a very common deck. But then I saw some blue. It was like a bit like confused, and then you brought in like a lot of creature on the sideboard, and I was just like not prepared for that, right? So
And that's what I
um,
like about this one. So
yeah.
the biggest highlight is kind of Oath of Druids and Terravor, with the idea that if your opponent plays a creature, you start milling your deck until you find a creature. That creature is probably going to Terravor. You've milled a lot of lands in the process. You have a free, 12/12 with trample. But the goal behind adding the blue is that I'm able to kind of counter, the sword, the inevitable swords, the inevitable, chains of vapors and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So I
because
can
you don't
keep
have a
my
lot of creatures, so removal is good
Exactly.
against
Yeah.
them.
So I need to get used to kind of just milling my entire deck, milling a third of it. But I also have to get used to having some really bad oath triggers. So it's kind of, the framework of Mox Diamond, Terravor, Oath, Sylvan Library is a popular one. Sword's also very popular. Adding the blue, not so popular. So this kind of reminds me of some of my favorite Legacy decks, which was Legacy Lands, where you mostly kind of win using your lands. Not too many in this one, but generally the idea of having a pile of lands really appeals to me. Um, where this one kind of does things also a little bit differently is the sideboard, kind of referring to Carl's point, in the way that if someone doesn't have creatures, like if you're running Stasis, Oath of Druids does nothing, but I can turn into a deck that pumps out creatures pretty quickly. So between Terravor, Meddling Mage, Call of the Herd, uh, you know, wastelands, treetops. I could fill up my graveyard to get a 4/4/5/5 Terravor, which is sometimes all that you need, and I could kind of fill up the board versus and put some pressure on those combo decks that don't have creatures. And
I
the
see.
mana leaks and fact fictions and the prohibits also, or not less the fact fictions, also give me a little bit more game against that those combo decks, because
What
sometimes all you need is that one key kind of mana leak to stop, a replenish or stop a stasis or stop a multitude of other things.
is it possible, since your deck is so odd and like because even for like a standard old deck, it's kind of really different. That when you do your fact or fiction, sometimes people give you a really good, they give you back a really good hand.
Yeah, I mean, the fact of fiction is something I've been trying for a few big tournaments,
It's a good trick.
with the idea that you know I'm playing Terravors and lands, and
They
getting a bunch of
think,
lands. If
yeah,
I put a bunch of lands in my graveyard, that's not the worst thing in the world. You're basically giving me +4/+4 to my Terravor or the
yeah,
next Terravor that I'm going to draw.
yes.
So that's where I kind of saw the strength of the factor fiction. That said, Sylvan Library does give a pile of value. So I'm even questioning how much I need to do factor fiction. And then if I didn't do factor fiction, I've almost got 2 free slots to do whatever the heck I want. So still some work to do there. I was almost thinking about putting in some Calls of the Herd main, maybe putting some Exalted Angels in the board, something like that.
Yeah, yeah. And I see that you no longer use the Gaia's Blessing.
Yeah. So as soon as you can either use, you've got Terravor, Guy's Blessing, Oath of Druids. You can't use all three. So you got to pick which two you're going to use.
Yeah.
So as soon as you're using Oath and Terravor, you can't be shuffling up your deck, or you're going to end up with a 1/1 Terravor, because your opponent will have one land in the graveyard. But there are decks that focus on Oath and Gaia's Blessing, and then kind of recycling your deck. And similarly, like if someone liked Guy's Blessing enough, they could jam it with Terravor, and it's kind of a way to just keep the pressure on and keep recycling those good cards into your deck.
I,
Not something I'd do, but something people could do if they wanted to.
I really like how fast you can put land in your graveyard. You have like what, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, about like 15 land that go quickly in the graveyard just by themselves. I mean, the fetch land, the wasteland, the gemstone cavern, and you have the Zuran orb to sack everything.
Yeah.
So this is a really interesting machine that is going on inside your deck. I really like this. Really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. And the reason I picked it is because, we are in our infancy here in Ottawa for the pre-modern scene. And I
Yeah.
think naturally people will gravitate towards creature decks. And that's the main reason I kind of brought Oath of
The
Druids.
Oath of Druids. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. and I played it for a long time. I know the decks. I made up several variants. I've tried and failed many variants, and I want to give this one a little bit of a whirl.
So something to watch. The last one I wanted to do. You have anything to add about that deck, Carl? Otherwise, we'll go to the last one.
Should we mention the Curse Totem in the main deck?
Oh yeah, I did not say that. Yeah, Curse Sodom.
I mean, I knew, Pat McElligott or Island King has been working on that Elves deck for a while. He's been doing really well with that Elves deck. I'm talking about, first place in two, I don't know, 80 plus person tournaments with Elves. And I knew he was coming, and I need to be able to, deal with Elves, which would be a rough matchup with this deck. As much as pulling out a 10-10 Terravor would work versus a lot of decks. The Elves deck can have such an explosive turn, especially with Anger being able to give all their guys haste. Can be
So
very
you went in the
devastating.
final against him, right?
Yeah, so it was
Deck
me
with
and him
Curtis.
in the final. I managed to get him in the Swiss,
Yeah.
and game one I had that backbreaking Curse Totem, and even when we played in the finals, I had a game one I had a Curse Totem. Similarly, in the finals, I had a game one turn two Curse Totem, similarly backbreaking. So I got lucky in those two game ones, because otherwise it would not have gone well.
But then he beat you in the
Oh,
final.
you got me the two other games. You got me for the for first place.
Yeah. Uh, so and the last one, I really find it interesting. It's not a deck we see often. It's got on my side, and I've never seen it before. I know there's some deck list that is going around. It's based on a deck from the more like from the legacy scene. It's the Enchantress deck, so it uses four Argotian Enchantress and four Enchantress Presents, which draw you card every time you cast an instant, and all the rest of the deck is just like 1 or 2 mana instant. To eventually you get your it's replenish and what's it called against the opalescence to turn everything into big creature. What do you think about that deck?
Well, this is kind of a common deck. Like I know you were mentioning that you didn't see it often, but
Oh,
it
you
has
saw it
been in
there?
the format since almost the beginning. It's
Yeah.
also one of the deck with the most DC deck entries. There's like
Okay.
a lot
My
of
bad.
variations of it, right? There was like a green blue version that was more combo-y. This one is maybe the more popular one. It's a bit slower. Um, but yeah, it looks pretty similar to like maybe quote unquote stuck. The thing that surprised me and were a testament to him being an old legacy player was like the sideboard cards, like the Moltanese presence. I think maybe
Yeah.
that's I never saw that before, so I presume that's like a port from Legacy where everybody's playing blue. Um, but yeah, those were pretty good against me.
That's interesting. I wanted to have my last question of the evening. So on the fifth position, we had Laura Wilkinson on Burn deck, which is like one of the most played deck in pre-modern. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's like it's one of the cheapest deck. Most people that start pre-modern go with that deck. This is what I did also. And we kind of starting to see like two different burn deck in pre-modern. So this is the one with the four Urza bubble. Cost zero, you draw a card on your next turn. You got to look at the one card from your opponent hand. And me on that tournament, I did really bad, so we won't talk really much about it. But I know that what's his name, Lanny from the Spike podcast. He's pushing a burn deck that use four sulfuric vortex main deck and the four ball lightning. So he's more on the heavier side of the mana curve. Do you think that Urza Bubble is really worth it? In that case here for that tournament, Laura told me that it was really good. Me, I think it's a card that do nothing. I prefer to have a one mana burn spell instead of the Urza Bubble. So I wanted to hear your theory about that. What do you think about this?
Carl, you go first.
Well, I prefer the 90s version. I think the bubble feel like adds fuel for the Grim Lavamancer, and that's about it. Like I don't really understand thinking about deck thinning behind it. I think it's somewhat insignificant. And the delayed card, like if it was like a Gitaxian probe or something like that, maybe. But the fact that it's
No, it's
delayed
the
to the
turn after.
yeah. And I just think I know that a Lanny Burn deck is very, very mana hungry, right? You have like
Yes.
8 3 CMC card, and that's maybe an issue that needs to be addressed. But I just I just love the 4 vortex when you play burn as the control deck, right? Like the
Yes.
gear theory, like gear 2, right? When you're like sitting and you
Yeah, it's
become
so
the
fun.
control deck, the vortex is there for your card advantage, right? So
Kill creature with the bolt, and you let the vortex do the job on the.
yeah. And vortex is a card that maybe if you read it naively at first, you think it's a good versus control, but it's really there to be to when you are the control deck.
It's a clock.
Yeah,
What do you think, Patrick?
yeah.
I mean, just looking at I don't have a strong opinion either way. I mean, I'm just going to look at it logically. You know, the Urza's Bauble is going to draw you a card on next turn, next upkeep, whatever. I mean, almost half of this deck, uh, in terms of its threats, can't be played at instant speed. So, you know, drawing your Grim Lavamancer or Jackal Pup Moth, like that does nothing the next turn when you're in top deck mode or when you really need that last finishing card. Sulfuric Vortex is backbreaking. It's a must remove card for me because it's very likely the opponent will have more life than me. So it's must remove. Like to me, I'd run 4 Sulfuric Vortex in a heartbeat. That said, with the red deck here, what I do really like is the ensemble of fetches. But people do run fetchless and kind of maybe trim a Grim Lavamancer or something like that if you're looking to save a little bit on cost, because the fetch lines do add a bit to the price
Yes.
tag.
But I want to add that Barbarian Ring's really good. It's
Yeah.
it's so good. Like it won me so many games that you're just because that deck you're like you no longer have any cards and he's on 2 life, but your Barbarian Ring does the job. Empty the graveyard, boom. It's so fun. So fun. Well, thank you very much, Carl and Patrick. So, Carl, if we want to play pre-modern in Montreal, I think you have a couple of gears going right now, right?
Yes.
It will be
So
added on the screen. Don't worry.
we have two. Sorry, what did you say?
I said I will add
Yeah.
on the screen.
So we
Don't
have
worry about it.
two events incoming. So next Friday, March 7th, we have a FNM at Jeux l'Expédition on the Saint-Hubert Plaza
This is
in
Metro
Montreal.
Beaubien, I believe, huh?
Yes, exactly.
So near
So at
the
6:30, we're gonna do a 3 rounder of pre-modern, and we're testing. We're testing the place, right?
yeah.
We used to have a lot of event at l'Anniversaire, and we were looking, do we want to be doing also event at Expedition or only at l'Anniversaire? So I'm doing like some kind of like A/B testing in the coming month, where next Friday we're gonna have at 6:30 at Expedition a pre-modern FNM, and then the Thursday after that, so on the 13th at 7:30 at l'Adversaire, we have a 3 rounder too. And my guess is that it's going to attract different people, because a lot of people told me like
It's the location.
Adversaire is too far or they don't want to play in a game store. So maybe I'm going to have like 2 different crowds. We'll see. But yeah.
Eventually they mix together.
Yeah.
Eventually. What about Patrick? If we want to play pre-modern in Ottawa, I already go to your monthly old school every month, and usually even if we play old school, people always have pre-modern deck with them, and I guess you might be thinking about having more pre-modern event in the future, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. Like I think if someone is just getting their feet wet and they're really looking for the reps, there's no shortage of online tournaments that are running on a recurring basis
Yes.
on MTGO using your webcam. All you need to do is, even if you don't have a webcam, is find, I don't know what app you use on your phone. You just need to point your phone
use
at
the phone.
a surface, make sure there
This is
isn't a
what I
pilot
do.
there, and
is
you
what
could
I
jam
do.
a lot of games. What's it called?
It's an application called Iryun, and it gets you to have your phone connecting to your laptop. So you just like me, I use a selfie stick to show my hand and my battlefield, and there's absolutely no problem with that.
Yeah.
And also, Magic Online is full of pre-modern scene now. It's I think it's quite big. I haven't looked recently, but it seems
Oh
to.
yeah, I mean the tournament that Ireland King's been winning at, I think those are 80 people.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, like
It's a
and
Magic
like if
Society, I believe it's called, huh? Something
oh
like.
yeah, that sounds familiar. So like if you want to play, there's plenty of places to play, and even in between those tournaments, if you don't want to slog through, a 4 or 5 round or 8 opponent kind of round robin, like you can find pickup games on the many discords that exist. And I'm noticing that there's not just discords for pre-modern, there's discords by community for pre-modern, there's discords by deck if you
Yes.
wanted to specialize in decks. So I mean, there's if you like Discord, there's piles of servers you can join.
Yeah, Discord is a must. Well, thank you guys. I'll put if you want to contact Patrick or Carl, their contact information will be on in the description of that video. And in the meantime, I wish you that you don't get too mana screwed in your next game, and have a good evening.
See you later.